Chapter 2. Old Wine in New Bottles. The thought of the 20th century has drawn boldly upon the past centuries for its stores of wisdom and philosophy, and has appropriated the same boldly and often without giving due credit. New sects, schools, and cults have arisen, all exerting a certain influence upon the general thought of the day. Theosophy has acted as a leaven in the direction of popularizing the Hindu conceptions, particularly in the matter of the doctrine of reincarnation and rebirth. Christian Science has exerted an influence in the direction of idealism, recalling in some respects, independent of its features of healing, the idealistic teachings of the Vedanta and of the Grecian philosophers. Unitarianism has exerted a powerful influence among the churches, and its effects are seen even in the pulpits which revile it. The higher criticism in the churches has tended to lead the public away from the old ideas to which they once were wedded. In the large cities, mention from the pulpit of eternal punishment, hellfire, or the personal devil, evoke smiles and shrugs. To an unprejudiced observer, it would appear that many of the old teachings have been left behind, never to return. But who knows, after all? Even their time may come again. 25 years ago, a close observer of the times would have felt perfectly safe in predicting that out of the babbling pot of that day there must emerge the new teachings of materialism, which at that time seemed destined to carry the day. But alas for human prescience, the very reverse has happened. Materialism has been shown the door. For the time being, and wonder upon wonders, advanced idealism has taken the center of the field of human philosophical thought. Yes, not only advanced idealism, but even a rarefied pantheism under other names. The predictions of 25 years ago have proven false, and the tables have been turned on the prophets of that time. Materialism has been eliminated, and its direct antithesis, idealistic pantheism, has been given the seat of honor. Not the crude materialistic pantheism which insists that deity is but the total of natural objects and forces, but the spiritual phase of pantheism which insists that deity is manifested in unnatural things, the doctrine of the immanent spirit, and this even in its most idealistic sense, for the advance wave of modern philosophical thought certainly holds to the idea that the universe is in reality an idea or series of ideas in the universal mind. The most radical branch of the great Vedanta school of the Hindus, the Advaitists, have never dared to go farther in this direction than the most advanced adherents of the 20th century idealism, which is exerting so powerful an influence on the public thought of today. Some who have not as yet dared to go to the full length of this extreme idealism do not hesitate to teach and preach the full doctrine of the immanent deity, which they hold is also taught by the biblical teacher who said that, "In him we live and move and have our being." This surely is a most radical departure from the old teaching of the deity who ever dwelt apart from his creation, and who made the universe from nothing. And surely, the standard built upon this new teaching must differ materially from those erected upon the old. It is this marked shifting of the foundation conception of the fundamental principles that has disturbed the edifice of thought, life, and action today. Have we discarded the solid rock for the sinking sand, or vice versa? Each must answer according to his own views and conceptions. The newer school claims that it has found solid rock at last, while the older school insists that its opponents are blasting at the Bach of Ages. Which is right, and what shall the harvest be? Time alone can answer. Each must be judged by its works. By their fruits shall ye know them. And time is required for the fruits and works of the new. Perhaps from the old and the new, a still nearer something may arise, better and nobler than either. Time must answer. Like the Sphinx, time crouches on her haunches, and with pensive, undisturbed eyes gazes out into the eternity of the future. What does she see there? What does she see, if we could only know? Those who may imagine that I have laid too much stress upon the popularity of the conceptions of the immanent deity, or the oneness of all, which is a distinctive feature of the newer thought of the day, I refer to the news columns of the papers of any large city in the land, containing the reports of the sermons delivered in the leading pulpits. Let them refer to the utterances of the great theological teachers of the day. Let them refer to the teachings of the following representative men of the great universities of the land, as reported in the daily press and magazines of the day. Surely these tell the tale in no uncertain tones. Harold Bowley, in a recent article in the Cosmopolitan magazine, entitled Avatars of the Almighty, gives a number of instances in which college professors are teaching this new conception of fundamental principles, the conception of the indwelling deity, of the immanent God. In conclusion, and now that man has discovered that there resides in his nature a spirit or energy that is divine, the colleagues say, and that he can summon it to work his will, the potency and future operation of Till's psychic force no man can compute. Science has found a way through psychology to God. The opportunities for the race, through invoking in the human consciousness the brooding spirit that fills all space, are absolutely infinite. Science, therefore, is demonstrating along new lines, or at least law claiming to demonstrate, that man is God made manifest. And modern philosophy, as set forth in American universities, holds this incarnation not as a fanciful and merely beautiful ideal, but as a working and understandable principle in the soul of humanity. The professors, therefore, who are digging what they believe to be the graves for dead dogmas, stand as exponents of the teaching that man is the embodiment and conscious expression of the force that guides all life and holds all matter in its course. Man begun the cycle of that triumphal daring prophesied by ancient seers, and which appealed so potently to the imagination of Poe. Not merely in religious rhetoric, but in reality, the schoolmen say, "I man the avatar of God." The reference to Poe law accompanied by the following quotation from that poet. Think that the sense of individual identity will be gradually merged in the general consciousness, that man, for example, ceasing imperceptibly to feel himself man, will at length attain that awfully triumphant epoch when he shall recognize his existence as that of Jehovah. The editor of the Cosmopolitan, in commenting on the article in question, says, "The college professors, in some cases, express doubt as to the practicability and judgment of their teachings. Will their propaganda cause a rejection of all solemn and religious authority, create a Robespierre, and erect a guillotine, with its concomitant tumbrils and blood atonement?" The professors say no. They assert that in this, the sanest of all ages, man thinks for himself, and the path they blaze for him leads to the realization that he himself is an avatar and incarnation of God. The conflict between the colleges and the church discloses a movement of thought more significant, perhaps, to civilization than even the Renaissance. In its revolutionary character, and in its importance to mankind, the only worldwide movement that can be compared with it was that upheaval in the 18th century which led, through bloodshed, to democracy. The claim of the colleges is that they are teaching a higher form of truth. They hold that the orthodox God has had his day. They say that when the God of theology is utterly banished from human thought, the reign of man will begin. They say, as indicated, that this spiritual revolution will not end in a saturnalia of tumbrils and guillotines, for this is not an atheistic banishment of God and his holy angel, but on the contrary, the enthronement of a new Jehovah, O God that has become conscious and potent in the human mind. Outside of the pulpits and universities, other influences are at work. In the first place, there is felt the great influence of that great wave of transcendental thought which swept over the country during the last century, of which Emerson was the chief exponent. The effect of Emerson's transcendentalism is most marked in the present unrest in thought and conception. His oversoul forms the basis of a mystical religion which has brought comfort and peace to many a weary soul. The very essence of his teaching is, of course, the oneness of all and the indwelling spirit. The influence of Walt Whitman, Edward Carpenter, and Browning has been felt in the general movement toward the transcendental conception. Maeterlinck has also drawn the attention and interest of many toward the same or similar conceptions. People who have studied the German philosophers, particularly Hegel and Schopenhauer, in many cases find themselves attracted toward the teaching and conceptions of the present stage of idealism. The influence of the Congress of Religions, at the tune of the World's Fair in Chicago, has led people to take a new interest in the study of comparative religion, particularly in the religions of the Orient, nearly all of which are based upon some form of pantheistic or idealistic doctrine. The effect of Christian Science and of the various new thought cults and schools has been to lead people's minds in the same general direction, toward recognition, realization, and manifestation of the God in me. In fact, It would seem as if 1,000 circumstances had conspired to bring modern thought to a point in which it must consider the new idealism and the new presentation of the immanent and indwelling spirit. The world seems to have turned its back upon orthodoxy, but at the same time has refused to entertain and accept the teachings of materialism, notwithstanding the predictions of the thinkers of the last century. It needs something to fill the place of the old ideas, which are being discarded, and the idea of the indwelling spirit. The oneness of all, the union with God, appears to be the local conception under all the circumstances. At the present time, there is certainly a wave setting in from all directions, tending ever towards centering the world's thought upon the old-new conception of fundamental principles. Whether it is permanent, or whether it will disappear in a reactionary movement, or whether it will evolve into something still higher and nearer to truth. These are the questions that observing men are asking each other today. It is indeed a wise one who can answer them. And now for the immediate effects of this change of conceptions regarding the fundamental principles. What effect is it having upon the people of today? What is its influence upon other lines of thoughts? What effect is it exerting upon the great economic, sociological, ethical, and moral movements of the day? How is the new conception working out in actual practice? These are important questions. Let us consider them. From the viewpoint of the unchanged, steadfast members of the old guard of orthodoxy, the new conceptions are pernicious in their effect, and can work naught but harm to the race. In the first place, say these good people, there is nothing new about the thing. It is as old as the race. This is undoubtedly true, for the same teachings, beliefs, and conceptions which are now so popular may be found in the oldest of the world's philosophies and religions. India and ancient Greece are the fountainhead of the basic ideas of the modern popular conceptions. In the Vedanta, in the teachings of Buddha, in the writings of Plato, Heraclitus, Democritus, and the Stoic philosophers, may be found the principles of the popular thought of today. The cycle, or spiral, of human thought has brought the old philosophies to the front as new. But is the fact that a new thing is really old any real argument against it? Secondly, say these critics, it comes from heathen sources. True, also, but this is circular reasoning. The fact that an old philosopher, before the days of Christianity, happened to fail to be a Christian is no argument against his truths. Nor is all truth, wisdom, and virtue the especial property of Christian thinkers. If we were to discard in heathen knowledge, the world would be a heavy loser. Thirdly, say the critics, it is naught but pantheism. This may be so, but, notwithstanding the odium attached to the term by the Orthodox churchmen, pantheism has inspired some of the world's greatest minds. There are two kinds of pantheism, the first being that of the materialists, who hold that God is but the sum and substance of the natural forces and objects. The second being the view of the God-drunken philosopher, Spinoza, who held that God was in all and all in God, that nature and the universe was but a manifestation of God, and that to define God is to deny him. To understand the charge of pantheism hurled at the old new conception of the oneness of all by the orthodox critics, one must realize what the pantheism of Spinoza is, and to realize how different it is from the old pantheism of the materialists. The following quotation, from the Encyclopedic Dictionary, states the matter briefly and clearly. The system of Spinoza has been described as atheism, as pantheistic, and as the most rigid monotheism, according to his cardinal teaching, that there is but one substance God, has been interpreted. By substance, however, Spinoza meant the underlying reality and ever-living existence, and he chose for the epigraph of his ethics the words of St. Paul. In him we live and move and have our being. God is for him the one principle, having thought and extension as two eternal and infinite attributes constituting its essence, of which attributes mind and matter are the necessary manifestations. And thus he solves the problem of the relation of the finite to the infinite. Everything is a form of the ever-living existence, the substance, go, which is and is not nature, with which be is no more to be confounded than the fountain with the rivulet, or eternity with time. God is nature naturans, nature is natura naturata. The one is the energy, the other the act. In the same way, B explains the union of the soul with the body. Man is but a mode of the divine existence, his mind a spark of the divine flame, his body a mode of the infinite existence. Surely this comes very near to agreement with the 20th century conception of the omnipresent spirit. If one is pantheism, the other must be also. We leave this subject in the hands of the respective schools. Fourthly, say the orthodox critics, when we deny the personality of God, we deny his being as God, and resolve him into a mere principle, the principle of nature. This is another matter which may he safely left for the consideration of the theologians. It is too technical for discussion here. We must, however, mention the view of Schopenhauer, who taught the idea of a world spirit, which he called the will to live. He said, when we assert pantheism, we deny the existence of a God. When we identify God with nature, we really show God to the door. The contention of the orthodox that all the attributes, qualities, and characteristics which orthodoxy attributes to the personal God disappear when the personality is denied seems to be worthy of respectful consideration. And the new conceptions certainly do emphatically deny the personality of God, and certainly do regard him as a principle. Therefore, we may understand the cry of orthodoxy that they would take away Jehovah and supplant him by a shadowy principle. But a university professor has said, the view of God which conceive him as external to the human self is a view which dominates the lowest forms of religions. Just how much of the old qualities, characteristics, and attributes of the personal God may be preserved when the personal conception is supplanted by an abstract principle, which must by its nature be absolute and devoid of qualities, characteristics, and attributes, is a question for the philosophers to argue among themselves. We do not hazard an opinion. We are merely the reporter of the observed ideas in the public mind. But, finally cry the orthodox critics, if you deny the personal God, the inspiration of the scriptures, and the authority of the church, you sweep away the very standards of religion, morality, and laws of human conduct. You leave nothing but a recourse to utilitarian ethics and systems of morality built upon the changing ideals of man, or of his supposed needs. Your standards change with the times. You destroy all standards, and the rock crumbles beneath your feet. We think this objection worthy of thought. It must follow that if the authority of the scriptures and the church is denied, then the standards resting upon this authority must likewise fall, and man must be driven to the erection of standards based upon his reason, judgment, and experience, rather than upon the authority of the scriptures and the church. And here is where many careful observers see the immediate cause of much of the sociological, economic, and ethical unrest and shifting standards of today. These observers say that the face, now in the process of discarding the old authority, must lose its faith in the infallibility of the old standards, and is beginning to create new standards based upon the needs, real or supposed, of the race. And this occasions much of the turmoil and bubbling in the great melting pot of modern thought. People are inquiring why they should be bound to old forms when the authority for those forms have been discarded. They ask why they should attempt to live up to the old admonitions. Submit myself to all my governors, teachers, spiritual pastors, and masters, to order myself lowly and reverently to all my betters, to do my duty in that state of life into which it shall please God to call me, when the authority of the church which so enjoined these duties is in grave doubt. They ask, the 10 Commandments denied as inspired, then what commandments shall we follow? If the scriptures are not inspired, what is the true rule of conduct and life? These are the questions that the plain people are asking. They are in a transition stage. They are revolting against the old rules of social life, economics, and the old morality, in many instances. They are disputing many venerable old ideas regarding property, social duties, relation of state and citizen, marriage, etc. The barriers down, they are thinking of building according to their wishes or requirements, rather than upon the dicta of churchmen and ancient prophets. All these things are bubbling in the pot, because of the changing conceptions of fundamental principles. On the other hand, the advocate of the new conceptions answers that, while this is all true, that while the old standards are being destroyed and discarded, that man is also engaged in building up for the race a newer, saner, and grander edifice of thought, a better, truer, and stronger set of standards based upon human needs, experience, and requirements, that instead of following the arbitrary commands of dead prophets and teachers, or of antiquated and discarded creeds, the race will move on, inspired by the indwelling Spirit of God made manifest as man, ever toward higher and nobler efforts, toward higher and better things, following ever the idea embodied in the lines of Holmes. Build the more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll. Leave thy low and vaulted past. Let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. And in the meantime, those of us who may feel confused at this process of tearing down and rebuilding, who feel the pang of letting go of the old, and the perplexity and confusion resulting from the attempt to adapt ourselves to the new, we who, though our faces and intellect be turned toward the future, still feel that our hearts are with the past, what is there for us to do but to proceed in our search with a positive faith, knowing that a constant and persistent desire for truth must inevitably lead us into the very light of truth? Thus it has come about that in the consideration of the conflicting ideas, theories, and conceptions presenting themselves for consideration at the bar of modern thought, there is a new school which is now making its claims heard, and which many think destined to occupy a prominent position on the stage of interest in the near future. This school has for its basic principle the idea that abstract truth is unknowable, that the mind of man is unable to grasp the idea of abstract principle, any more than it can grasp that of abstract air, abstract water, abstract stone, etc. It bolds that man does not and cannot know whence he comes, whither he goes, or what is the object of his existence, and that, therefore, his highest wisdom lies in accepting this fact and then living in the here and now, accepting what good may come to his hand, discarding all questions incapable of definite answer, being kind and doing good wherever he can, not as a duty, but because of the evolving feeling of the brotherhood of man, and finally testing all statements of truth by the touchstone of utility, asking ever the questions: what is it good for? How will it work? What can be done with it? Does it make good? This class of thinkers show a preference for the pragmatic view of thought and life, which Professor James has so well stated as the attitude of looking away from first things, principles, categories, supposed necessities, and of looking toward last things, fruits, consequences, facts. After all, would it not be strange if the pragmatic method should prove to be the solution, should prove to be the test to be applied to the products of the melting pot, the final test of how does it work out? What is it good for? What will it do for the race? How far does it make good? Meanwhile, the pot is bubbling, seething, and sputtering. The crucible is heated to its fullest extent. Some of the thoughts and ideas placed therein we know to be true. Concerning others, there is grave doubt. But what will be the new arrangement, the new system, the new application? In brief, what will be poured forth from the pot? The world is on tiptoe, watching, wondering.